Welcome everyone back to another episode of Energy Unleashed. My name is Suzanne and I'm here with my partner Kim. Hey
Hello,
girl,
Suzanne. Hello,
how you doing?
everybody.
Well, we're in Minnesota right now when we're taping and it is what? Gazillion degrees below zero
It was
today.
20 below zero with 30 below wind chill
And I
this
think up in Duluth it was like running like with 50 below or something with wind chills. I mean, what are we doing living here?
doing.
Right?
Oh
Ah,
my
well,
God.
hey, what the heck? All right. So, oftentimes I bring together some concepts that I have as my clients bring forward in energy sessions. And this is interesting, Kim, because I've had a little bit of consistent, I don't know, struggle over the last week with about two to three clients in different ways. So I'm going to kind of lump all this together and toss it your way and see if we can unleash this a little bit. It started with one client who was new, and she is maybe in her 30s, early 30s. And she herself was a product of divorced parents. And so she said she has a lot of struggles in adulthood about making decisions and moving forward. She's got a lot of things that she's dealing with, etc. But I mean, one of the things I was zeroing in on was her struggle with belief. We talk a lot about belief systems. So her struggle with belief systems because of the broken household. I go to mom's house and it feels like this and we believe this. And then I go to dad's house and it feels like this and believes this. Not even a week later, I had almost the same exact scenario happening with another client, but it wasn't a broken household. So I don't want to put this on divorce as much as this is interesting to me that when we have parents that we're raising, children, we put our belief systems on them, right? I mean, that's what we do. And we put our family beliefs, our heritage beliefs, we put our social beliefs, we put everything on them. And oftentimes, moms and dads don't have the same beliefs. Do you
Oh,
remember getting married and having your first kid thinking that you and your husband were going to raise the kid the same? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, wait, you believe what? Because when we have a kid, oftentimes these different kinds of beliefs about discipline or obedience or respect or all these weird things pop up that we didn't even like maybe discuss before we even thought about having a kid.
yeah, well, because especially we were so young and
Yeah.
we didn't even think about that stuff, So as you're having to maybe discipline your child for them doing something or your like sleeping hours, or just like preparation for bed, just
Yeah.
weird things that were like, wait a minute, like what that's not how
What
it's
are
gonna
you
work.
doing? Yeah, that you don't do it that way. Or eating in front of the TV because no, we have to eat at the dinner table. I
Yeah.
mean, this was so apparent with this woman, but what was so amazing is it was really putting limitations on her as an adult
Mhm.
in terms of being able to own her own decisions and really, really still in her mid 30s when she also had children, by the way, to own her own Mm, I mean, accountability without having to validate from outside herself. So this thing keeps going and going and going in terms of limitation and or not when we're adults. And it's critical that we all stop and go, wait, I get to dump all this crap,
Yeah.
right? I don't have
Right.
to believe
Because
any of this.
yeah, like you said, with her children, she's only repeating what she was brought up with or key, whatever that is. And you're just perpetuating it for generations. Like,
Without even thinking, because
yeah.
it's so automated.
Mhm.
Or then there's a third client that I came across in this kind of same umbrella situation, and I watched for common denominators. Same scenario, but literal choice of I'm going to do it absolutely the opposite because I didn't get this. So
Um,
that's the last twist to also unleash in terms of, okay, my mom never showed me any attention or any compassion or any hugs or any kisses. So now I'm going to smother the crap out of my child. And, they're 14 and I still, watch everything they do and smother them with kisses and they're dying now because it's like, no, back off. So it's really crazy that we don't think about this stuff and talk about this stuff and stay present with it when we are parenting. I think it's just kind of amazing.
yeah, and I think even just it's beyond parenting, even in a relationship.
Yeah.
How do you handle a disagreement with your spouse? It's based on what you've learned about your parents. Was it knockout, drag out, screaming and
Yep.
yelling, or was it silent treatment? Was it, what is that? And
Hmm.
I yeah, I unleashing this is huge because I do like the perspective of stopping this or creating new ways to do things that are more meaningful to you in your heart space,
Hmm.
your truth. Because I did a lot of things with my children growing when they were growing up that my parents, provided for me, or whatever it is, whether it was religion, and beliefs, whether it was how you interact with your family, your extended family. There's just so many things that made me who I am.
Hmm.
That as an adult, and especially hitting like 50 years old, it's like, wait a minute, some of these things just don't feel right for me.
Yeah, it's like a
And,
shoe that just doesn't fit anymore. You're like, this
yeah.
just doesn't wear well
And
any
even
longer.
I didn't realize that it didn't feel good for me at a younger age necessarily because it's supposed to. And so you just keep going, right? And that is where I think I became so numb that I wasn't following my truth, what I really felt I needed to do in my heart for some things, that it was really hard to untangle all of that at the age of, whatever, when I started doing my spiritual journey. It was
Hmm.
really tough to untangle that because I thought everything was fine. I don't have anything in my, eh, I'm good. And then I went to Peru.
And everything went to hell.
What's happening?
Yeah, yeah. I think it was super interesting. The one client, when I talk to people in my office, I talk about energy lines oftentimes. And when I'm meeting with the client, I'm scanning them and I'm watching them talk. And when I bring up something like talk to me about your dad, as a practitioner, I see the lines of how that parent will be, meaning the dad in her case was very straight lines. That means I have no wiggle room. It's either this or this. It's black or white. You follow my rules, you do it my way. And that's what I mean when I watch the lines of somebody. So the dad's lines were very straight, very boxy, very patriarchal. You have to follow this, da da da. The mom's lines were all over the place, like swirly, swirly, and even more than just creative swirls. Male energy goes very line like, female energy goes very spiral. But hers was even all crazy spiral, meaning she didn't really even have, she wasn't present with her creative energy. It was just all over the place.
So there wasn't a
And
consistency in the
yeah,
spectrum, like
yeah.
balance.
So think of
Okay.
this kid. This kid goes to, you follow all the rules. You have to be obedient. You have to prove yourself. A B isn't good enough. Da 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 da. And then we've got crazy mom over here who, you're sitting and I'm making this up for a point. You're sitting on the couch, eating, Captain Crunch for dinner out of the box without even milk because you're watching a movie at 11 o'clock at night. It's very confusing for that kid
Mhm.
in terms of what does that look like for me when I'm older. And the reason why I want to bring this forward is it's our personal responsibility. Like you said, yours was tipped in Peru, it opened up in Peru, but not everybody goes to Peru. We have opportunities to open up these things when we give attention to it. I'm an adult. I get to realize, wow, I had really, really bipolar messaging as parents for foundational safe and acceptability. And what do I get to take from that? And oftentimes, to be healthy, we want to glean some off of this and glean some off of this and create our own. And it's really important for us to do that because, like, for example, my mom had an open door policy. Everybody was always welcome. There was always another plate at the table. If there was a street urchin friend of ours, they were always welcome. And I adopted that really, really automatically. But at a certain point, I'm like, I've got urchins all over my house and they're just going into my refrigerator without asking. That's not
Taking
acceptable.
over.
No, no. And so I chose to modify that belief system in a different way and have more lines or rules on top of that. And so we want to look at that. We want to be present with that and really be aware of that because we don't just automatically become who we think we're supposed to be.
So okay, so how, gosh, like take the divorced family situation
Hmm.
and you've got younger children, like, whatever age, like say kindergarten, first grade.
Yeah, and under
And
7 is when we're already locking in. So that 6, 7, 8 period is really critical.
yeah, and that's where I really struggle with, because I've witnessed, situations where the parents, the reason they're not together is because they couldn't agree on anything that they're doing, and their family
Yep.
lifestyles are very different in each
Yep.
household. And so for a parent that understands this, say you're one of the parents and you understand this, how do you work with that child to understand why that's happening and
Yeah.
like to really understand what's meaningful for them, I
It's
guess.
a super great question. And oftentimes I will find in my office, parents will unify in certain things or they're completely opposite, polar opposites and things. And both of those are difficult because we oftentimes think as parents that we want to unify for our kid to make a point. And I understand that and I respect that. I really do. But I also respect the polarization to some extent as long as it is not used in manipulation. So I want to point out the danger is, let's say, I'm just going to use something simple or something. Okay, let's use something really obvious like religion. So if I'm a really religious family on one side of the coin and I have no religious over here at all, just not even a thought of it, and I'm bouncing between households, it's very confusing to me to come over and be very religious and then I go home and there is no religion, right? So I'm not unified in that messaging in any way, shape, or form. What I think is the most healthy is to teach the child that there is choices all throughout life, all the time. Everything has choices and that it is okay that people are different. But what is not acceptable is the manipulation behind the scenes going, well, dad's a freak because he thinks this, that, and the other thing, and mom's a that because she does this, and it's that. So that transition from household to household is really critical in understanding that either choice is okay. And when you're older, you get to make that choice. Now you're having experiences of both because this is the situation. So it's giving you information, curriculum, experiences, et cetera, on both sides of the coin, but eventually you get to choose. And you may choose neither. You may choose a combination. You may choose to run away. You may choose anything. That's the message that I think is the most important, that there's infinite choices on self-responsibility. And when we're so bipolar, the saddest part is oftentimes we're making fun of somebody behind their back.
See, and that's where that be making fun of it or being angry about it or
Yep,
whatever that other situation might be. That's where the disrespect and the behavioral issues I think really come up
yep.
because you're trying to please this parent and I just can't imagine that going back and forth, especially if you have such negative influences on one side or both sides.
And
You
think of something as simple, you said respect. Think of something as simple as respect. That is not simple in a subject at all.
know?
If I have a patriarchal, it could be dogmatic religion, but it could also just be maybe I was a militaristic kid, and my dad demanded respect. And if you talk back or you show up, as be seen but not heard kind of a thing, I don't want to hear you. This is adults now. You disappear. All those things are real. You don't talk back to me. You have to do what I said because it's respect. Those are really, really confusing for a kid when you get over here and there is no respect,
Oh,
right? And they
yeah.
don't have to
Yeah.
respect you. And I think the conversation is that's dad's or mom's level of what they grew up with, what respect is. Mine is a different container. Mine is a different something. If I don't get that messaging, I'm going to be very confused. That said, it's like my client. Maybe you are still confused at 30, but even at 30, you're in an adult situation where it's your responsibility now to figure out what your beliefs are. And it doesn't matter if this happens at 20, 30, 40, or 80. You
Yeah.
get an opportunity if you choose, when you choose, how you choose to go into those belief systems and re-narrate.
Right.
If I'm miserable and I'm still searching for outside respect and outside validation 24/7, I might want to sit down and do some work on my belief systems, right?
Right. Yeah, and where they came from and what feels good, what doesn't. I mean, using your
Yeah.
internal thermometer of what does this feel like for me, you know?
And we can take this to another whole level, which I don't really want to get into deeply here, but I'm going to put a toe in the water in it, in that this can also go into the conversation of soul contracts. I picked that original family to have militaristic this, that, or the other thing, or I picked that divorce situation to experience the polarization of those beliefs. I picked a lot of these things. So we do pick our family scenarios to some extent in soul contracts. So when one is still 30 years old feeling victimized,
Mhm.
that's because you picked a victimization opportunity. I hate the word lesson, but opportunity or lesson here to move through that lesson, right? Move through that curriculum.
Mhm.
And so it's my, again, on me to say, oh, I'm going to change this. I'm going to, live out the second half, third half of my life in a different way because I get to. And so these are all things that come back to the person. We don't get to point fingers at everything and everybody throughout our life. We can, but it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
No.
So these are really, really tough things. But the hard part is when you're seven, none of that makes sense.
Not at all. Not at
Right?
all. And that's, I think, I don't even know if I would have had the patience to sit down and be that kind of person with that child necessarily where I was in my life at that time. I can't say that for sure, but to actually engage in conversation, even with a 6 or 7 year old and understanding their feelings around this,
Hmm.
what makes them uncomfortable, what they're comfortable with, like that kind of thing, I think is just really it's not easy to do, but it's so important
Hmm.
because they need to be heard, like you said.
Yep.
If they're
Yep.
not heard, they're just shoved place to place. And you need to behave like this at my house and behave like this at the other house, or even within the same house. If it's just mom at home, wow, it's all fun and games, maybe, or it's
Yep.
not, whatever, that is. And then dad comes home and it all changes.
Yep.
Like that is very confusing for a child just as much as going house to house.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a divorce by any means.
Mm,
And even within a household, there's so much undertones of mom and dad aren't on the same page. And I mean, that's really difficult. And there's undertones of conflict.
mm,
And oftentimes, I remember even our kids, stop fighting. I wasn't even fighting. My voice was just at a frequency that was making them uncomfortable,
mm.
and I grew up in a loud household. And so our kids went through a transition period too, and that isn't a fight. That's just me having and I remember I said this a lot to my kids. This is not a fight. This is that mom has a different opinion than dad. That
Mhm.
doesn't mean this is a conflict. That doesn't mean this is a fight, but I certainly get to articulate and show up for my own opinion on this. I'm
Right.
not sitting here browbeating your dad into changing him into what I'm saying, but I get to own my own. And I have very independent kids because they saw that, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that's a great thing for them. However, they saw it as a young child as a conflict because it felt conflictual. I don't even know if that's a word. Conflicting energies, it was unstable energies at that time. And so, yeah, it's not, there's no handbook. We all know that, right? Who's ever going to write that parenting handbook is going to make $1 bazillion, right?
Oh my gosh.
So,
Because you can go to the extreme on the other side of you can be, like just be everything you want with
yeah.
no like influence
Yeah.
whatsoever. Can also go pretty badly,
No,
potentially.
and kids want structure. I remember being the house where all the kids hung out because we had a skateboard park in the back, and I'm not exaggerating when I said we'd have 20 to 40 kids in our yard. And a lot of them were coming from households that didn't have any structure. And half of the reason they liked coming to the Worthley yard was the structure. We had, simple but very clear rules about things in the yard, and they all adhered to them because they didn't want to lose out on being able to come and skate. So you find that a child will automatically be okay with some semblance of stability, boundaries, etc., as long as they're not crazy off the charts, commanding respect that is just silly and over the top. So they're so fear-based when they go to that extent.
Yeah,
So
right. They're bringing it with them. But okay, I'm going to say this. I witnessed this at your home when your son was married a couple years ago and you had the outdoor wedding. The kids that came that grew up in that neighborhood and went to your skate park and all of the things at the end of the night when you said, "All right, everybody, it's time. It's time to clean up. Let's do this." And I can't even, I had to stand back for a second and watch because they jumped in with no hesitation, giving each other a bad time, having so much fun doing it. And it
mhm.
was they knew what to do. Like
Yep.
they just all fell in and
Yep.
here we
And
are.
cleaned up and packaged everything and it's all done. And that was kind of an MO that I started years and years ago because we were host to so many events and so many parties for those kids. And so part of that boundary and that rule is if you're going to be here, you're also going to clean up because I'm not going to have you, eating and partying and having fun and not doing any of the cleanup. And it was an automatic thing for so many years. And that was funny because now they're in their 30s
I
and
know.
all I had to do is pull out Mrs. Worthley voice and boom, they all,
And they're all like, okay. And they
yep.
were happy to do it. And
Oh yeah,
they
super
were
happy.
excited to help out. And I
Yeah, and the
was
girls
in
went in the
awe of
kitchen and
that.
did all the food and all the baggies and all the Tupperware and all the everything, and the guys did all the heavy lifting. It was great, and
Yeah.
that is a boundary that was very clear for years and years. And it's funny that you even saw. I remember your face. You're kind of like, "What's happening?" And I'm like, "Yeah,
I
this is
know, just watching everybody jump to attention and they were excited to do it. And they were,
yeah."
I just was like, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so I just there's beautiful, awesome things that we can do to raise children, and there's probably a million gazillion things I did to make my children go, I don't even know what to think about, this. I'm sure that I screwed up a million gazillion things as well. The point of this whole conversation today is we're only humans, and when we raise our kids, we're doing the best that we can at the moment. But it is about empowerment for me. I mean, even that's empowerment. I'm not going to be responsible for all of your partying and your fun. You're going to help. This is part of the deal. You partied, you do the responsibility of cleaning it up. And it doesn't have to be horrible. It can just be responsibility, cause and effect.
Mhm.
So when we're watching such bipolar thinking we're supposed to be in unison and we're not. My biggest plea, I guess, is just please watch the manipulation behind the scenes because that's what's hurtful. That was coming out in this client. I was so confused when mom would say bad things about dad because I still loved him, or dad would say things about mom because, she's crazy or whatever. Those are the hurtful things that go into adulthood with the person who ends up in my office. And that's the hard part. So we do get to the point when we're in adulthood where it's now our responsibility.
Mhm.
My responsibility as a human on this planet having an experience on behalf of Source is for me to find my own empowerment, for me to be seen and heard by me first and Source and my guidance, not by everyone outside of myself. And that's the ultimate, I think, messaging for everybody, regardless,
Mhm.
of how they're growing up. I think that's important.
Oh, it's easy to lose sight of some of that too. I
Yeah.
mean, the holidays are a good example. I always bring that up, but I get lost in there somewhere,
Yeah.
and you have to take that step back. And I always take the step back and it's like, okay, where am I right now?
But you're doing so much better because you're not doing spreadsheets as much.
Right.
I remember when I met you, you were like, no, I can do a spreadsheet for the holiday on who's responsible for what.
Oh my God, Kim, stop it.
Yeah. So anyway, take what resonates on this one. Any grandparenting advice from you before we stop?
Oh, I just, I've seen this in different people in my life, even. And it's really be kind to yourself, love yourself, and put the time into yourself, and the rest of it will come around for sure. I think
That's
that's
great.
really important. And that's probably one of the hardest things I think for some people to do, especially
And
if
and
they have felt
lastly,
as a victim.
and I think when you do that, Kim, when you do that, you don't expect your children to be a reflection of yourself as much. And I think that's
Right.
what I wanted to end with. And that, I oftentimes remember experiences and seeing people, through hockey parents or, baseball parents or whatever, when you're on teams and all the people and the kids and the parents, our kids are not a reflection of us unless we make it be that. And they are individual souls that came down here for experiences. They're not little carbon copies. And it's really important for us to have that knowing deep inside of us. And when we really do know that, we are taking care of ourselves first. We're not pushing them to be little mini Xerox shootouts of the machine.
That's such a good point because watching parents try to live through their children
Scary.
and make it like they wanted it to be for themselves, even if it wasn't for them
Yes.
growing up, is just I just brought ickiness.
Yep.
Oh, it's
Yep.
it's not it's a lot of pressure to put on a child, that's for sure.
Yep. And then lastly, when you are the adult, do the work. Do the work to go untwist that. Do the work to unleash your own beliefs and let them go. Recreate your narrative, recreate your story because you get to. So
Yeah,
I think that's pretty good.
absolutely. No, that's
Awesome.
a good one.
Okay, well, hopefully you'll grab a golden nugget along the way on something on that. And if not, that's fine too. Maybe leave a comment. It would be curious to know how other people feel about this subject because we are all in relationships. Like Kim said, this doesn't even have to do with just kids. It's relationships, it's parents, it's all this stuff. So maybe hit subscribe or share. We would love to hear from you though. So on behalf of both of us, thanks a lot for listening and cosmic hugs.
Goodbye.